All right, you guys good to get started?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. All right, well, welcome to the booth here. We're going to do a presentation on data insights with no-code tools. So first of all, let me just give you an introduction to myself, and then I'll talk a bit about what we talked about yesterday and kind of get into the presentation. So my name is Tim Rasica. I'm a software developer and a YouTuber. I run a YouTube channel with about 1.5 million subscribers, and I teach people how to become software engineers. Now, I've worked with Bright Data for probably about 3 years now. We've done a lot of collaborations where I've used their tools and shown other people how to get past kind of common data blocks and how to collect mass amounts of web data. It's actually a really big issue for developers to try to go from, okay, 1, 2, 3 pages of data to hundreds of thousands of pieces. And a lot of managers will go to a developer and say, hey, go collect all of this data, and all of a sudden, I mean, they have no idea what to do, right? They're good at writing code, but not really scaling it up, and that's kind of where Bright Data comes in. So yesterday we had 2 sessions, and in those sessions we talked about some, let's call it more hands-on tools that Bright Data provides to developers at kind of a lower level that lets them collect all of this web data. Some of those tools were a web unlocker and a CAPTCHA solver. So you guys have probably seen CAPTCHAs before when you go onto a website. I mean, developers deal with this as well when they're writing bots, and Bright Data has a tool, for example, that can automatically solve those CAPTCHAs. So just one way that we can get past some of those blocks. We also talked about infrastructure like proxies and IP rotation, so how you navigate to a site from, say, Australia, Canada, US, compare different prices, the type of data you're getting, and then how we scrape data efficiently and at scale. So again, how we go from a few pages to tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, so you can get the data you need for your business. Now, in this session today, we're going to go a little bit higher level, and I'm going to talk to you about something which are the Bright Data datasets. So rather than having a developer do this manually on their own, Bright Data actually provides a bunch of different data sets that you can hook into, filter, and use in your business. So rather than needing a development team to go and write all these scrapers, it's already provided for you. Now we'll also talk about how to support data-driven marketing and how you take those data sets and actually generate insights for your business. It's one thing to have data, it's another thing to actually be able to use it and get some meaningful information from it. All right, so I want to start by just walking you through the data collection process. Now I know it looks a little bit confusing when it pops up here, but I just want you to understand how difficult it can actually be for someone like me who's writing code all day to collect a bunch of data from the web. So the first thing we need to do when we're collecting data is identify a target. What website, what data do we actually want, what structure do we want to get it in? We need a bit of a strategy. After that, we need to unblock the site. So if I try to go to a site 100 times from my computer, I'm going to be blocked, my IP address might be banned, CAPTCHAs might be popping up. It's really a pretty difficult challenge to get by, and that's kind of what we talked a bit about yesterday. And then locate the desired information. So what you see here is something called a DOM. This is a document object model. And this is what happens on the website. This is kind of the code that's running it behind the scenes. You might have seen this if you ever click on inspect element in Chrome or something. So what I have to do as a developer is I got to look at all this code and I got to figure out what parts of it I actually need, because that's not just like viewing the website. I got to go look through all of this code, which can be pretty confusing, as you might imagine. Then I got to scrape it, I got to validate it, and then I got to scale this up so that I can view this page hundreds, if not thousands of times and collect the right data and make sure it's meaningful, validated. I'm not getting a bunch of junk that I'm giving to, for example, my boss, manager, client, etc. Now, technical challenges, you could probably imagine what we're going to deal with there, but first of all, programming knowledge. I don't know if any of you guys are programmers here, but yeah, you're a programmer? What do you usually write in?
I used to be like,
Oh, okay. But you would know that that's not trivial to do, right? To write that code. You can probably figure it out, but someone who's just off the street is going to be able to write that. Yeah?
I'm the audience.
Okay, perfect. And then ever-changing dynamic data. So it's great if we write this once, but website data is constantly changing, so we have to keep modifying and changing the scrapers. That's really inconvenient. Framework knowledge, we're probably not just going to do this with a standard programming language. There's going to be additional tools that we need to learn how to use. Documentation, reading through other people's instructions on how you go about doing this. And then we need integrations, tools, so that other people are able to actually view this data. And then worrying about storage and storage access. Okay, we get all the data. How do we store it? How do we let people actually view it? So this is an example of a site, LinkedIn, you guys have all seen, that's actually notoriously difficult to scrape. And one of the reasons for that is because of how dynamic the content on this site is and how it's rendered and loaded. There's a lot of JavaScript, which is kind of running behind the scenes, that when you go to the website, this content doesn't already exist. It needs to be loaded and is very, very difficult to actually pull the data you need. There's all kind of blocks that'll be implemented. LinkedIn's data is very, very important. I mean, they sell it, they charge for it, so they obviously don't want you to actually access it. So with Bright Data, rather than going there and manually trying to scrape it, even if you have access to the tools that help you do that, you can just use a data set provided by them. Now this data set is updated regularly, and it provides millions, in this case, I think 544 million records of all different types of LinkedIn data. Now another thing you can do with this is if there's a profile on there that maybe was recently added or it's not a part of the database, you can actually request that it gets scraped automatically. And the way this kind of works is Bright Data has scrapers they've written in the background. So rather than you writing it yourself, you just use their scrapers and then go access this massive data set and you can filter through it. So just to give you an example, if we go here, we have the ability to filter this data set. We probably don't want 544 million records. And you can see that we can get all of the Google employees in US and Canada. So I can go and just filter by US Canada code. This is a very simple filter just to give you the sense of what we can do with the data. Obviously we can add subsets, groups, more advanced filters. If you had a programmer on your team, they could probably go in and do some pretty advanced stuff there. Now here's just an example of what you'd get back when you actually do that filter. You can see that we get all the different employees, a lot of them in the main offices, San Francisco, Los Angeles, etc. And there's all kinds of other fields, 30 in fact, that show you all the data about these different people. So if I was maybe a hiring manager at Facebook or something and I wanted to go and find a bunch of employees at Google, I could do that by using a data set like this. And I'm sure for your businesses, you can imagine types of data sets you could use, probably not LinkedIn, but maybe something else. All right, so let's talk a little bit about how the data sets actually work and some of the features of them, again, versus manually scraping it yourself. No coding data collection, so that's really the main advantage. You don't need a team of developers, you don't need that expertise to actually get the data, it's provided for you. And then strict validation methods. One of the major issues you'll have if you try to collect data on your own is that a bunch of it is garbage, a bunch of it doesn't actually work. You still need someone to comb through it and make sure that it's valid. Having too much data is almost worse than just having the data that you need, right? This is obviously already validated for you using AI as well as human intervention. API for on-demand data, so what that means as a developer, I can hook into this data set and I can trigger it with an API and I can get it in my own internal tools or wherever I need it. I can integrate it in my system. 100% compliant scraping. Something a lot of people don't consider is that it can be very illegal to scrape data depending on the way that you do it. You need to comply with all kinds of different regulations and laws. In this case, you don't even have to worry about it. Bright Data just does it for you in a fully ethical and legal way. And then pre-built or custom. In that case, I showed you a pre-built one with LinkedIn, but if you wanted a certain site scraped and you didn't want to do it yourself, you could actually contact Bright Data and they could build the scraper for you. And then set it up like this. Just an example, these are a bunch of profiles that maybe weren't in the data set that I wanted to be scraped. This is a relatively new feature, but what you can do is just put in the different profiles you want, just the direct links, and then you just initiate it and it's going to give it back to you in an API format. If you're a developer, you'd understand that. You can just ingest that and bring it in your own, own systems. So if you're missing some profile, you can get it from that. Great, so now let's go into some e-commerce use cases. Obviously, it's Shop Talk, so we can move outside of LinkedIn and talk about things like Amazon and other sites you might be familiar with. So there are a ton of pre-built data sets here. We have a bunch for all of the different Amazon sites, for Spain.com, UK, etc. Just showing you some of the different records that we have, and this can give you all kinds of product information. So here's one, this is just for Amazon.com, probably the most popular one most of us are going to be concerned with. 267 million records, and I just want to show you some of the data you would get access to with a data set like this, which is probably a bit more relevant. So we'll just go through these really quickly, but you can see title, name, brand, initial price, currency. We have, things like the domain, images count, URL, image URL. I believe there's about 50 fields here. Item weight, rating, dimensions, ID of the seller, model number. All these things that, again, you need to manually code in yourself are just provided for you, and you can pick and choose kind of the information that you need. I don't want to bore you with all the different fields, but just trying to show you that it is exhaustive on pretty much anything that you would want. And there we go, origin URL, bought past month, etc. And now we'll just look at some filters that you could apply here. So for example, maybe I wanted to find all of the Samsung products that were listed on Amazon.com that have reviews greater than 1,000 with rating over 4.5. So I'm looking for pretty much the top sellers on Amazon from that specific brand. Maybe that's my competitor and I want to compete on those different ones, or I want to promote my product above theirs, right? Just an example use case. You could do way more advanced filters than this, and I'll show you some actually. So this is an example of results that you would get back. You could just download these, you could have it sent to your email, you could ingest it with an API. And if we go here, we could look at one for Balenciaga. So let's say we're some kind of fashion brand, maybe trying to compete in the higher end fashion. Well, again, this data set's already built for us. We don't need to go manually scrape it. And if we go through here, we could do a bit more of an advanced filter. So maybe what I want to do is actually get poorly rated men's XXL products. Maybe I want to compete for supersize, or if we could go very small as well. So I can do some kind of filters like this. I'm looking for men in Australia where the products are in stock, XXL with a rating lower than 3.5. And then if I run that, again, I get all of those different results, and that could generate a lot of insights for my business. You guys know as a business what you need, and you can go in and apply those filters. I'm just trying to show you some examples of things that you could potentially do. So what are the benefits of data sets? Well, the first thing that I really like about this is it's just much faster to actually experiment and get insights. Typically, the process would be some manager comes down to a developer, says, hey, we need all of this data. It takes a few days to even understand what the requirements are. You go back and forth. They scrape some data, it's not really what they want, and it's just this continual process where eventually maybe you get to the result, but it could take weeks or months. Here it's practically instant. It's also very transparent how much it's going to cost and how quickly you can get that data. And again, it just lets you really quickly generate insights, and if something doesn't work, that's fine, you move on to the next thing. It didn't cost your organization a month of time and tens of thousands of dollars in developer resources. Automatic scaling, again, you saw how many records we have there, hundreds of millions in some cases. Trying to do that, even with the tools that Bright Data provides, is going to take a little bit of time, right? It's going to be a bit difficult. If you have the data set, well, it's already provided for you. Seamless integrations, I mean, you could just go and look at it on the UI of the website, but for a lot of us, we have our own internal tools where we want to ingest this data. We can do with that, and then obviously less developer experience required. Any of you sitting in the audience here could use this data set tool and go and do the filter. You don't need an experienced developer like one of our audience members to be able to do that, right? So that's pretty much it. Those are the data sets from Bright Data. I hope this was valuable to you guys, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them. Yeah.
Very good.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, I appreciate it.